Is there a time when we actually do really need fibre? I've been looking into some information with regards to my husband, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So my hubby started eating a mostly carnivore diet when I started 3.5 years ago. He was just a few weeks after me. He thought it was a bit crazy at first, and then he decided to drop the veggies and everything. And so he's been eating a mostly meat diet for 3.5 years with some sourdough bread. So we make sourdough bread and we ferment it for 72 hours to get rid of most of the gluten. We use organic white flour, so there's no folic acid or anything added, and hopefully no glyphosate. And so he eats that every day at lunchtime. He'll often have honey with that. But apart from that, he eats meat and cheese and some eggs and bits and pieces. And so that's been his diet for the last 3.5 years. And the occasional berries and stuff, the same as I have. So in that 3.5 years, he's had some ongoing issues, the same as me. And one of those has been his skin. Now, he's always had funny stuff go on with his skin, even before carnivore, which we thought might have cleared up while he was eating this way, but it hasn't. And in fact, some of it seemed to be kind of getting worse. So let me explain. He's always had like dry patches on his skin. In 2019, before we started eating this way, he ended up with psoriasis all over his body. That was after his father died. I did a video talking about that, which is actually on my Rumble channel, because we used something that YouTube don't like us talking about to clear that up, and it did. He got rid of the psoriasis. We have photographs. He was a real mess, and yeah, we managed to clear all that up. But he still had all these ongoing issues on his skin, especially on his upper body. So he has had like really dry, scaly patches where the skin seems to overgrow on his face, up here. His nose, the skin on his nose has been really bad for quite a lot of years, and it was actually getting worse. It's got a little bit better, but he has a lot of capillaries on his nose. His skin on his nose seems to be really thin and really fragile. And, after he's had a shower, it'll be really dry. Like, he doesn't use any skin products. He uses no shampoos, detergents. It's just water. It don't even have chlorine in our water where we live. So it's just pure water that he's putting on himself, but still his skin on his nose and his face, but especially his nose, gets all peely and flaky looking after he's been in the water. He has had growths on his skin. He had one here, which I think I did a video about, which we've got a hydrogen machine, and he was using that Brown's gas on it every day, and that eventually got rid of it. It took a few months, but it eventually fell off, and now he has a scar there. But it was quite big. It was touching his glasses, the growth. And, as I've said before, we're not fans of going to doctors, and if we take him to doctors for things like this, they're going to want cut holes in them, and then things are likely to go from bad to worse, so we just don't go there. He's also had some other little growths in front and behind his ears, and he's had them on both. They're almost like a flat wart. I think that's what they are, and they every now and then they'll play up and they will get a bit scabby and bleed. But the one on one side, he actually scratched it December last year, and then it hasn't been right since, and it's growing and hasn't looked real good. It's a lot of people kind of look and go, like, you better get that checked out. But we've been there before with his skin, so we know that if we keep experimenting, we can usually get rid of these things. Years ago, he had one up on his chest that came up like a big tumour, and that was really pretty gnarly, but he managed to get rid of that. Using baking soda, believe it or not, and lemon juice, and getting his body really alkaline, so that got rid of that. He had one on his leg years ago that was there. It was an open sore for 2 years and wouldn't heal, and we tried all sorts of things on it. Ended up being Manuka essential oil that got rid of that. So there was obviously some kind of, I don't know, I'm guessing some kind of bacteria or something in there that was contributing to the fact that it wasn't healing, maybe. I don't know, but we've used all sorts of things on his skin to get rid of some of these things. Years ago, he used to go and have them burnt off at the doctor on his backs of his hands and places, with the liquid nitrogen. But the doctors don't seem to really do that anymore. They want to send you off and cut bits out and biopsy and all the rest of it. And so, and then, yeah, that can just cause more problems in my view. I'm not telling anybody else what to do, but in my view and his view, we're not fans of that. So anyway, so he's had all these skin things going on, and he's got some on his chest now that have flared up a little bit. And, you know, so for 3.5 years, he's been with his skin the way that I was kind of with my bowel and what was going on with me. It's like, well, you know, it's going to heal eventually on Carnivore. It has to heal, right? And I kept saying to him, yeah, maybe you should drop your coffee. The coffee is one thing and the bread is the other, but he won't give those up. So, but still, he's eating a super clean diet, you know, and getting tons of nutrition with all the meat and the fat and everything that he's eating. And yet these things are still a problem. And so with my change of diet, I've been looking at some different videos and different information out there. And there was a video that popped up on my feed, an interview with a lady named Karen Hurd. And I had never heard of her before, pun intended. And while I don't necessarily agree with everything she was saying, everything that she kind of thinks is right with regards to diet, she does have a very interesting story that got her interested in diet. And her story is basically, I'll link to her video below because it is a really interesting story. Her story is that many years ago when her kids were little, her husband is a pastor, and he had a job at a new church, and there wasn't a lot of money in this church, and there was a house for them to live in, but it hadn't been lived in for a lot of years. And so the congregation wanted to do it up a bit for them. Somebody had some carpet in their garage that had been rolled up, and they said it was, you know, in quite good condition, and so they put this carpet into the house. Now, when Karen and her family moved in there, once they started turning heating on, they soon discovered that the carpet was infested with carpet beetles, and she said that there were so many they just couldn't get rid of them. Didn't matter how much they vacuumed, squashed them, they were everywhere in the cupboards and the drawers. The place was just crawling with these carpet beetles. So they ended up giving in and getting somebody in to spray the carpet. Now, she said she asked them, you know, is this stuff safe? You know, is it okay for humans? Because she had been in the military, in the army, I think, and she was trained, and her job for 4 years was teaching the military personnel how to take care of themselves if they were poisoned with some kind of, you know, biowarfare, poison stuff, whatever they use. I don't know the right terminology, but that was her job, was to teach them how to look after, you know, try and undo what had been done to them. So she knew about chemicals and poisons, and so she was concerned, rightfully so, about the stuff being sprayed on the carpet. But they assured her that it was safe. So the family left the house, the carpet was sprayed, they came back the next day. I think she said the windows were left open, and they came back the next day. They got home, she put her 18-month-old daughter on the floor. Oops, there's a truck or something going past. Sorry about the noise. It's just really nice day to sit outside, so here I am. And so she put her 18-month-old baby daughter on the floor, and within a very short time her baby was having a fit. So they rushed her to the hospital, was told that she was having febrile convulsions, even though she wasn't running a temperature. Went home, went back to the hospital again. She said there was a couple of visits to the hospital, and I think the second time the baby was fitting for 1 hour and 10 minutes. Still being told that it was febrile convulsions, but they couldn't do any testing on the child because she was fitting, and it was going on and on and on. They were told that she was probably going to die because they couldn't do anything with her, and they didn't know really what was going on. So she said her husband and her prayed, and then the baby stopped fitting, so then the doctors could do some tests on her, and they found that her lungs were full of fluid, so they decided she had pneumonia. And that, again, it was febrile convulsions, even though she wasn't running a temperature. They wouldn't listen to the mother, to Karen. They thought she was a neurotic mum, you know, as they do, talking about this poison that was sprayed on the carpet. And so anyway, they went back when they got home after the child being in hospital. The baby still wasn't well. Doctors couldn't find what was wrong with her. She was basically dying. Her liver wasn't functioning properly. They were testing her and could see that there were things wrong, but they didn't know what the answer was. And they basically said that the baby was going to die. She wasn't feeding. She wouldn't eat, you know. And so Karen she decided she was going to go and do some research for herself. So she went to the Washington University, Medical University, I think it is, and She went and did a pile of research. Back then it was on microfiche and books, you know. She looked into the studies and the information on poisons and the liver. And she discovered some stuff about soluble fibre and decided that she was going to try this because her daughter was dying and there were no other options. So she used soluble fibre, put it into a syringe, put it into her baby's mouth, made her baby swallow it. And she did that every day. I don't know how many times a day, but she did that. And within 2 weeks, her baby was looking like she was recovering and starting to eat. And that baby is now a full-grown woman who actually works with her mum in her mum's business. So she saved her daughter's life. Now, the story goes on, you know, she actually became a little bit famous because there was a newspaper article and people started looking for her help, and she ended up doing a degree in something to do with human health, bio something, I'm not really sure. But, and so that's become her thing over the years. So when I listened to her story, that got me thinking about my husband. So I'll tell you a little bit about his history. My husband has got basically the same genetic variations as me. So I've said to him, I think we're twins because we have a lot of the same stuff going on. There's some differences, obviously, but some of those main ones like the MTHFR, we've got the same MTHFR gene variations. We've got the same MAOA variation that gives us a slow MAOA, which then affects our COMT gene, and it all kind of gets a bit complicated. And then there's another one, I can't think what the other one is, that affect the way our bodies use food and break down neurotransmitters and all those sorts of things. So we're very similar in that way, and with the whole detoxing side of our bodies, that can be potentially a bit impaired as well due to our genetics. Now he, in the past, so my husband has dyslexia, so he's dyslexic, didn't know he was dyslexic, went all the way through school being told he was dumb. And this is a video I'm going to do too one day very soon. So couldn't read, doesn't do numbers, that sort of thing. So his only options really when he left school were to do something where that stuff wasn't needed. And he ended up mostly doing factory type work and labouring and those sorts of things. Just, you know, shit kicker jobs, as he says, standing on the end of a shovel or working in a factory. Now, some of these factories and places that he's worked at have had really toxic materials that he was working with. So this was a long time ago where there was basically no workplace health and safety. And so he worked in places like, here in New Zealand, there was a company called Expandite that were in Petone. They ended up burning down, the factory burnt down. But when he worked for them, he was working with hot solvents in small rooms without ventilation. And he said he would come out stoned off his head because he wouldn't even know what the time was. You know, he'd worked through knockoff time because he was just off his trolley with all the fumes from the solvents. He worked with asbestos there, where he was dumping large bags of asbestos into vats with no masks. I think they had dust masks, maybe. I can't remember. No, he didn't have dust masks for that. They used to wear dust masks for the solvents, he said, apparently. But asbestos, dumping that into big vats that were churning, again, in small rooms with no ventilation and no masks. He worked, I've got some things written down here because I'll try to remember. So he also, another thing which I have thought about a lot about over the years, his teeth were really bad, and he had a mouthful of amalgam fillings, and when he had his teeth taken out, he's got no teeth now, when he had his teeth taken out, he had staining from his mercury amalgams on his gums, so they had actually been leaking, so his body was probably really toxic with mercury. So the asbestos and the solvents at Expandite, he's worked in paint factories and places like that, so again, more really toxic stuff. He worked at a place called Yabulu Nickel Refinery in Queensland, and luckily he wasn't there for too long, but they were working with nickel, which is a heavy metal, and Yabulu is known, if you do a Google search on Yabulu, you'll see that it's recently gone into liquidation. It was owned by the government, and I think Alan Bond was the half owner when he worked there, and then another one of Australia's rich lists had obviously taken that over. I can't remember which one, but it's gone into liquidation. Now, Yabulu is known, when you go look, for the health issues of the employees. So he actually met someone when we were travelling in Australia, who had worked at Yabulu around the same time as he did, who said everyone he knows from that place has died because things, and cancers and things like that, because the place was so toxic. So my husband, when he worked there, was made to go into areas that had such strong ammonia they had to wear oxygen masks and lifelines, and they could only be in there for a few minutes because the areas where they sweat, like under their arms and their groin and that, would start burning. Sometimes they would have to walk through those areas without masks, so they couldn't breathe. They would have to walk through, and then once they got out they could breathe. They would also have to go into areas that were radioactive, so they would close these areas down one day. The supervisor or whoever would go in with a Geiger counter the next day and go, oh yeah, it's safe to go in, and they would go in and work in these radioactive areas. And then he's also worked in Australia in a power station where we used to live, and he was part of the cleaning crew, and they worked in these big areas where they were cleaning silica. So silica is really harmful for our health as well. They were using fire hoses and hosing these things out to get the silica out of them, and the supervisors would come in and they would check, and if there was any silica in there, it's like, no, you've got to do more because we can't send our tradesmen in there with that there. So the tradesmen couldn't go in, and supposedly the water was going to save them from the silica. That was the theory behind that. But the silica, you know, if you're inhaling it or anything like that, it's really dangerous. So a lot of these things that he's worked with are fat-soluble toxins, and I've been using ChatGTP a lot to try to work out what the best path is for us, how, like, to make sense of things. And so I've been putting all this stuff along with our genetic variations and everything into ChatGTP to get some information on the potentially the best paths for us to go with all of this. And so ChatGTP has told me that the fat-soluble toxins can still be in his body all these years later. They probably are, because your body will slowly release them if it can. And so when I listened to Karen Hurd's story with her daughter and the soluble fibre, I started looking into information about that and putting that into ChatGTP as well, and learning more about fibre. So as we know, within the carnivore community, we're told we don't need fibre, and the whole thing is made about pooping. Okay, so you don't need fibre because you can still poop without it. But the different types of fibre do different things in our body, and the soluble fibre, so insoluble fibre bulks the stool. Doesn't mix with water or anything like that, and that's in a lot of the skins of your fruits and vegetables, and it's in nuts and seeds and different things. Creates bulk, but it's kind of that sweep, bulking and sweeping fibre, and I agree that we probably don't need that. But after looking into the information about the soluble fibre, I'm wondering if some people, or most of us, might actually need some soluble fibre, because what happens is when we have these toxins in our body, these fat soluble toxins, which are really common these days, but maybe not in the amounts that my husband has probably had in his body due to his work history, the body will try to will release those, and then they pass through the liver, and the liver binds them to the bile to pass out through the stool. But if you don't have soluble fibre, then that doesn't happen, potentially doesn't happen. And so those toxins are recycled with the bile through the liver. So they're just recycling, and making the liver work harder than it needs to, stopping it from doing other things. And so that could be contributing to my husband's skin issues and things, you know, some of these skin things not healing. It's because those toxins are recycling in his body. And so, I mean, even in the past, before Carnivore, he would have been getting some soluble fibre, but probably not in the amounts maybe that he needed. And so what we're doing now is he's actually started to have some, I've got some notes here, so I'm just kind of keeping an eye on those to make sure I don't forget anything. So he's started having breakfast again, because he wasn't having breakfast, and he's actually having oats for breakfast in the morning with psyllium in them, because oats and psyllium are two of the best sources of soluble fibre. Now there are the best sources of soluble fibre are psyllium. Hang on, I've got them written down somewhere. Psyllium. Yeah, psyllium, pectin, so pectin from apples or citrus. Slippery elm is a great source of soluble fibre, so slippery elm powder, which is something that I've used a lot over the years with my gut. Flax and chia seed, cognac root, oats, and inulin. Now, the seeds I'm still not keen on having. I don't think they're a good idea, so we're not going there. But like I'm eating apples every day. He struggles to eat apples unless they're cooked because he's got false teeth and he's actually only got a top plate. He's got a bottom plate, but he can't wear it for eating. He can wear it, but he can't wear it for eating. We got that when he had his bottom teeth out, I don't know, maybe 18 months ago. And it was a complete waste of money. The teeth just aren't right. We went back and back and back, but it's a long story, but it was just a complete waste of money. And so at the moment he has no bottom teeth, so he eats without those. And so he's having oats. He has oats with psyllium and just some berries and some molasses, I think, on it in the morning. And then he's still eating his lunch as he has done and his dinner. So still having meat and his sourdough bread at lunchtime, and then meat for dinner. And he's also eating a little bit more fruit as well, the same as me. And he's starting from today, he's making a batch of bread and he's going to put psyllium into his bread. So just increasing that soluble fibre. Now already he's noticing some differences, I think, just with having the extra carbs in his diet. It seems to be because he's been doing that for a couple of weeks with me, more fruit and stuff. And he had a period of time after starting to eat oats where his breath was really bad, but it seems to have settled down over the last couple of days. And that happened when he first went on carnivore, so it's obviously something to do with his microbiome. His bowel was a little bit unsettled, I think, for a few days, but it seems to be settling down again now as well. And what else? He's had really low testosterone, so he hasn't had it tested for quite a long time, but the evidence is there that his testosterone was pretty tanked. And that had been happening gradually, I think, for a long time. But then we did a stint on the vegan diet before we started on carnivore, and that just tanked his testosterone completely. All his muscle disappeared, libido, everything was gone. Now there's evidence that that's gradually has been improving on the carnivore diet. And this is the thing, is like with our diet, eating carnivore and him kind of mostly carnivore, we've been feeling pretty good mostly. Like there's been improvements, but there's just some things that weren't improving or kind of we're going a bit backwards. And this has kind of been the concern. And like he's different from me in that he doesn't have any kind of weight issue. He tends to be the other extreme. He's actually had lost too much weight after being vegan and too much muscle. But all of a sudden over the last couple of weeks, it seems like he's putting some muscle on and building some strength, which is really cool. He said that he noticed the other day he had been so weak that if he was filling the kettle up, if the kettle was full, he struggled to carry it to the bench. It would be wobbling like this. I remember being like that probably a couple of years ago, maybe before we started on carnivore or around that beginning patch. But he really hadn't got stronger, and it was still hard for him to do that. And now he said he's noticing that he can hold it up under the tap and not have to rest it on the bottom and carry it to the thing. So he's definitely getting stronger. Because he's been doing some weight training and stuff for quite a while, but nothing really seemed to be changing. But all of a sudden it is. All of a sudden it's changing. So that's really cool. Whether that's down to the extra carbs that he's eating, or whether it's just got to that point, or whether it's our supplements that we're taking. Where I've been putting that all as ChatGTP, and it's giving us suggestions based on our genetics, and so that all seems to be working as well so far, and I'll probably do a video talking about that. But my thoughts with ChatGTP is, my husband's a bit sus about the whole AI thing, and I don't blame him, but my thing is I understand how the AI stuff works. I worked in IT in the past. I've done a bit of programming. I know that it is just a program. We watched something the other day. People were asking like personal questions and stuff, about their past lives and things, and believing that ChatGPT is somehow some kind of sentient being. All these AI things are some kind of sentient being, which they are not. But for this sort of thing with the health, I'm finding it really beneficial because it's not biased. So it's not a carnivore and it's not a carb eater. There's no bias there. I can put my information in there, ask questions, and it explains things for me. And if I don't understand, I can ask it to clarify. And so it's like having a health advisor there that you can ask anything of and get non-biased information. Wait for that tractor thing to go past, and get non-biased information. So that I think is a real benefit of the AI. Now, with the soluble fibre, so sources of soluble fibre, that's what I was going to mention. If you're wanting to know, as I said, psyllium is a really good source. Oats, legumes, apples, citrus fruits, flax and chia, cognac root, barley. Barley I'm not a fan of. Jerusalem artichokes, garlic onions, leeks, asparagus, and slippery elm. So they're all good sources of soluble fibre. I'm not a fan of legumes or nuts or seeds at this stage, or barley. Yeah, so that I personally wouldn't be going there for that, but there are other sources. I mean, even taking psyllium, like if you think that this might be a thing for you and you're on carnivore and you don't want to go back to eating something that's, fruit or whatever, you could take psyllium and see if it helps, because the psyllium is just the soluble fibre. So that's always an option. And so soluble, the differences between them, as I was going to say, is soluble fibre dissolves in water and creates a gel. It produces in the body, so when you consume it, it produces short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and others. So the microbiome actually consume that fibre, and it has benefits for gut health and keeping the gut lining sealed and healthy. Whereas insoluble fibre, that's the fibre that does all the bulking and the cleaning out. It's hasn't got that many benefits. I mean, if you don't believe, which I don't believe, that stuff is needed, then it's not a biggie. And I'm actually a little bit sus about some of that stuff because it's in the skins of the fruits and veggies. I was just talking to hubby about that before. Like in the past, so I had potato last night with my dinner. I don't have it every day, but I've had it a few times because we've got potatoes growing in the garden. And years ago, everybody peeled their potatoes, and then all of a sudden it was put to us that it was healthier to keep the skins on and have them with the skins, but all the plant toxins, or most of the plant toxin, most of the oxalates in the skins, if they've been sprayed, there's going to be more spray on the skins, and then you've got this insoluble fibre in the skins. So, I think I'm very much, as I've said before, I'm very much a conspiracy theorist. I think a lot of this information has been put out there for nefarious purposes, like things have been slotted into the health sphere and into the diet information to undermine our health, and because those who make money out of that are controlling a lot of the the media and all the rest of it, and so they've been gradually kind of slotting this stuff in and leading us astray. It's like with the whole vegan movement. So that's my belief about that. And yeah, so that's all I really wanted to say on that. So basically, without the soluble fibre, those toxins, those fat-soluble toxins, may just keep recirculating in your body and putting your liver under stress, and your body isn't able to get rid of them. So we are, as I said, we're testing that with hubby. We're pumping a heap of soluble fibre into him, and we will see how his skin goes and see what changes. And he's still going to keep eating a lot of meat. As I've said, I mean, my ideal diet right from the beginning of this would be meat and fruit if I can do that. But the eating a lot of meat felt better, but at the moment, we're experimenting and changing some stuff up to see if we can find a way to resolve these little things that have still been going on, and then our diet will evolve from there, but it will always involve a lot of meat, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, so if you've got any comments or questions, pop those below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. And if you want to find out why I've changed my diet, you can check out this video next.